Guys, so while I was talking about writing burnout, I thought I'd also talk about reading slumps because they happen and you know what? It's okay. And I think probably one of the best things you can do when you're experiencing a reading slump is to talk about it so you can figure out why, so you can figure out solutions to get you back to reading because we are all people who love stories and we want to get back to reading because when we are consuming stories, it's when we feel the most in our element and the most like at peace with the world, you know? So I thought I'd talk about like some common reasons people have like a book slump and like what my opinion is on kind of some of the best things you can do to get out of that slump. So especially in the booktube world, one of the most common reasons people have book slumps is because of stress or overwhelm. So one of the causes for stress is because if you know how YouTube works, then the more regularly you can post a video, the better it is for the algorithms. That isn't to say that you can't take like a 2-week break or something, because you totally can. But like if you stop posting for 6 months, engagement is going to suffer. So sometimes people get stressed out and they don't want to even miss 1 week of uploading. One of the best solutions to that is to film a couple videos in advance, especially if you're only posting once a week. You can film a couple videos, schedule them out, scheduling is your friend, and you can have videos going up, and meanwhile, you're taking a break for 2 weeks, and no one will ever know. Unless you're wearing the same shirt like I am. Of course, the easiest solution to most of these problems is not to care, but it's really hard not to care, especially when it's like when you're a YouTuber and that's like your job. For those of us who are hobbyist YouTubers, it's less big of a deal, but you still would like people to like watch your videos and enjoy them. Which brings me to the second reason people especially in the booktube world, have reading slumps is because they get stressed out trying to read a certain amount of books every month, especially if they're buying a lot of books, or they get stressed out, you know, trying to read certain books or like popular books, or they get worried about books that publishers send them and they feel stressed out, you know, worrying over like reading those books in a reasonable amount of time, finishing those books and liking those books, because they're afraid that like if they don't like the books, then the books will dry up. And that might happen. But the good thing about the books drying up is that now you don't have that stress anymore. Problem solved. But also, it's kind of like if you want to read those books, you can just buy them. Or you can go to the library and get them. So you don't have to wait for somebody to send you the book. Or, you know, if you really want to read a book, you can probably ask the publisher or like get on NetGalley or something and see if they will send you the books individually. Because what publishers want more than anything, more than for you even to read and like the book, is for you just to talk about the book, especially if you have a large following. Because word of mouth is the #1 way people find out about new books. They found out about books from a friend. They found out about books, like even like my Amazon recommended, I think, are word of mouth, because they're books that people are buying. And so Amazon is like, oh, you bought a similar book, well, here's a book that's similar to that book that a bunch of other people are also buying. So it's a little bit different if you're getting the book directly from the author. If you don't like absolutely love the book, then those books might dry up. But again, if you really want the book, you can buy the book or see if it's available at the library. And again, it's best not to care so much about whether people are judging you for how many books you're reading. Like, people are subscribed to your channel and like watching your videos because they like the books you read and maybe they like you and your personality, and so they're there because they just want to see what you're reading. They want to see what you're talking about. You know, they want to see what kind of books you're buying, what kind of books you're reading, because again, like that's probably like where they're getting most of their book recommendations from. And so if you only read one book that month, like that's totally fine. Just talk about that one book. And if you read 12, then you have kind of a situation where I have sometimes where you're trying to squeeze like 10 books into a digestible video. But there's nothing wrong with it either way. Bookish people like books. We just want to see you talk about books, whether it's one book or 15. So the publisher situation brings me to another reading slump problem, is that you find yourself reading the book that you're not interested in. Again, if you got sent that book from a publisher, you can feel obligated to finish the book and to like the book. But again, like I said, I feel like what the publishers want more than anything is for you just to tell people that the book exists. So if you're reading a book and you are not enjoying it, you are not obligated to finish that book. You know, reading is subjective, opinions are subjective. Everybody's not going to like everything. Just because you didn't like it doesn't mean somebody else won't like it. I feel like my job when I'm reviewing books, especially when I didn't like something, is to say why I didn't like it, because my reason for not liking it may be a reason why somebody else loves it, you know? And so that way they can say, oh, well, that doesn't bother me. I'm going to read the book anyway. That happens to me when I'm reading book reviews all the time. So if you're reading books that you don't like, genre of books that you don't like, stop and read something else. There are so many books, there are so many genres, there's so much bookish goodness to be had. Like, there's no reason to torture yourself. Like, recently I was trying to read this book and it sounded really good and the reviews are actually pretty good. I think the book is trash and I refuse to torture myself. So I'm not going to, but just because I don't like it doesn't mean that, you know, that everybody else is crazy. They like it, I don't. You know, my reasonings for disliking the book are obviously reasons that don't apply to other people. But I know this can be a problem for people, especially when you're like trying to grow your channel. You want, you know, to like draw people in by talking about books that they're searching for. But, you know, the problem with that as a viewer, like for me, like I don't have like popular taste. Like I just want good books. And so sometimes, like, you know, if all people are talking about popular books, and then I'm like, well, I'm not interested in those books. And also 50 other people are also talking about those books. I want people to talk about, you know, something else. Especially because while I do have, you know, decently broad reading tastes, they are still limited. I still prefer, like very strongly prefer, like paranormal and like supernatural horror and like just darker themed books over like all the other books. And so especially channels that focus more on like those kind of books, those are always like my favorites, because that's when I can get like real book recommendations, like books that I would actually enjoy. So another thing that can cause a reading slump is like just being busy. So one of the first times I experienced like a real like significant reading slump was when I got to college, and this was actually the hardest one to get over. And that's just because when I was in college, like I was so used to being able to read during the day. Like I would read in class, especially when I was in middle school, I would read like in the hallways. But like, you know, like Belle, when I was stuck in a book. But anyway. But when I got to college, like, I couldn't read walking across campus, or I run into something. There's people everywhere, right? And, like, when I got home, you know, back to my home dorm after classes, like, I often had work to do, or often I would be exhausted and I would want a nap. Or, you know, you have your friend who's like, hey, let's go get lunch, or hey, let's go to the movies, or hey, let's go get dinner, or hey, let's watch, you know, the Friends finale. And so I couldn't read in class in college because I needed to pay attention, because, you know, like, it wasn't like high school where, like, things were just easier and not everything they talked about was important. Sorry, not sorry. You know, in college, it's like you have no idea what's going to be on the test. I just didn't know how to, like, manage my time, and that can be cause for a reading slump, like, especially, like, you graduate college for the first time, and maybe you did have a lot of time to read in college, unlike me, because I was an English major, and we just have to write a lot of papers, and there's just a lot of text to read, and you have to read and like interpret the text and write papers, and it's just a lot. And like I said, you're hanging out with your friends on like a Tuesday, and that just, you know, doesn't always happen, you know, in high school. So time management is a problem. And so, like, sometimes when you graduate from high school or college or something and you start working a job and you're used, like I said, to being able to read during the day, and now you're at work all day, and then you come home and then you have to, like, feed yourself, and maybe you have kids to take care of, or maybe you have, like, a spouse to talk to, and it's just, like, it's a lot. And so, you know, you have to make it a priority. You have to make time to read. And so you have to make that decision that on your lunch hour, you know, you're going to read instead of stare at the wall. Like, you're going to, you know, read in the morning. Like, maybe, you know, you can get up at 8:30 instead of 9. I don't know when people go into work. But, like, maybe you need to leave the house at, like, 8:45. So maybe instead of getting up at 8:30 and, you know, throwing some water on your face and, you know, drinking an energy drink for breakfast, and then running out the door, maybe you can get up at 8, you have time to, like, eat real breakfast, curl up and read for a few minutes and then go to work. You know what I'm saying? Or maybe in the evening before bed, after all the kids are fed, if you have kids. And after you talk to your significant other, if you have one of those, then like you can curl up and read. You know, you have to make time because again, like when you're a bookish person, like reading is where you feel like, you know, again, the most in your element, the most at peace with the world, you know, the most joyful or whatever. And so you have to make time for that. And like in my case, like I didn't have like a significant other or a child or even a dog, you know, taking up a lot of my free time. I was so tired from work that I would just watch TV all night. So the first thing I had to do was get rid of the TV. That's why I don't have cable anymore. It's because I just don't have time to watch all those shows. I don't, which is why I kind of binge watch stuff in pockets. And so it's like, okay, this month I'm going to binge this show and then I will watch that. And then that way I watch a couple episodes and then I read. And it's just been much better for me mentally. But sometimes you have to do that. And I know, like, there's a lot of good content, especially on, like, Netflix or something. But it's like, especially on Netflix, it's not going anywhere. So whether you watch, you know, one episode or 2 episodes a day, you know, you can do, like, you can do multiple things in the evening. You can watch your show and do some reading and pay attention to somebody who lives with you if that's what you have going on. But it's like you have to make sure you're making time for things that are important to you, making time for things that you're passionate about and things that make you happy and like bring you joy and whatever. Otherwise, you're just unbalanced and you're unhappy and you're just stressed. And what's good is life if you're not enjoying things in life? And so this last reason for a reading slump probably only applies to maybe like a writer, but like the last time I had a reading slump, it was actually a combination of the not making time for reading and a combination of just being straight up jealous. So as a writer, and also as an analytical person, I do compare myself to other writers a lot. And sometimes I would read a book and I would think, well, I can do just as good as this person. So I don't know where everybody's, you know, drooling all over this book. And so there would be that mindset. But on a much larger scale, it was, why is everybody better than me? Why do I suck? Why have I been writing like literally my entire life and I still suck? I'm comparing a first draft to a final draft. And so I'm over here dragging myself and feeling bad. And it was really difficult for me to read. And so comparison, it is a real problem. And so even though I compare myself on the regular, you know, I do my best to not let it be overwhelming. Like if I read a book and this happened to me really bad in February. There were a couple books I read in February that I was like, why is it so much better than everything I've ever done in my entire life? I think it may have been 3 books too, actually. You know, the solution I found to that is to say, instead of beating myself up and not reading anymore because I don't want to be depressed, or, you know, not reading because I can't stop comparing myself, is to just go ahead and let that comparison happen. And instead of me beating myself up and dragging myself down and not reading anymore, I look at that book and I say to myself, what are they doing that I'm finding so fascinating? Because it might be something that I need to work on myself. And so kind of taking that comparison and like turning it into a positive is a really good solution for like that, you know, specific problem of reading the book and thinking it's amazing and thinking everything you write sucks. And so, like, I'll just give you an example. I was listening to Nosferatu by Joe Hill, and I was sitting there, because this is an audiobook, and I was sitting there thinking, why is this so good? And I felt the same way when I was reading Horns, because there's just something about his writing that's like, I'm like, this is the writer I want to be. I want to be like this good. And so instead of beating myself up and not reading anymore and not writing anymore, I was like, okay, what is he doing that I am finding so good? You know, and then that helps me as a writer. And it also helps me find books that I enjoy more too, because then I think, oh, I love the way he did this in the book, and this book sounds like it's going to do that too. And so then I read even more good books, and then hopefully I become a better writer. So hopefully this video isn't too long, but these are just like some reading slumps that can happen and some simple solutions for how you can get yourself back on a reading track. And because after all, if you're a bookish person and you're reading the book, that's when you are the most balanced and the most at peace with the world. So hope you're having a great month. Hope you're having a great reading month. If you're not, talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's work through this so we can get you back on track and reading some great books. Because, man, if you're a bookish person, there's like few things more, just satisfying in the world than curling up with a good book. So I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.